Hello, friends, and welcome to today's live level up conversation. Whether you're joining me live or catching me on replay, happy Thursday. We have a very special episode to share with you today. Let's get started.
Welcome to Level Up with Winnie Sun. Award-winning financial pro. Get ready. Level Up with Winnie Sun.
Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. For those of you who are back again for another episode, welcome back to the show. If you're brand new, hello, I'm Winnie, your host, an award-winning financial pro, Forbes contributor, and a CNBC council member and CNBC contributor. We are here streaming live on a whole bunch of social media platforms. And most importantly, I have a very special guest for you. Now, we did teased that he was coming on yesterday. We were joining me live yesterday, but I want to give a moment and just say hello to everybody. Let's just kick it off. Let you know, at least, the market's still open. We've still got about a little bit less than an hour to go. Let's let you know where it's sitting right now, because the Dow is currently in negative territory, down 114 points. NASDAQ's up 64, so we'll take it. Those of you who follow that or in technology, you might be happy today. S&P 500 is up 3 as well. At least it's positive, right? It's not all negative. We want days like this. There's still a lot of news that we are still flushing out, hopefully to get some better news out of Washington, D.C. And of course, hopefully all things are okay at the Federal Reserve as well. But with that, let's go ahead and introduce a very, very special guest. I'm going to give you full disclosure. I'm going to welcome Steve onto the show. Hi, Steve.
Hi,
Hello.
Winnie.
How
Good
are
to see you.
you?
Thanks for having
Thank
me.
you so much. It's been so long. I'm so glad we get to reconnect and spend some time like that. I think the last time I saw you was up in the Bay Area, right?
Mhm.
And it wasn't that long ago, but I remember the kids were still little and
Yeah,
time has flown by, right? It's
it has.
wonderful.
It has. And now I'm here in Minnesota and pleased to be joining you over live stream. This will be fun.
It's amazing. Well, those of you who are brand new to the show or just joining us live, give a warm welcome to Steve. Of course, Steve Grove. Let me just tell you, you're in for a treat. Not only is he just really incredible human being, but a total powerhouse. And I've had the pleasure of calling him a friend client for many, many years. And so a very special guest and one who we got to talk about your journey, because I know your journey has been all full of purpose, reinvention, and sort of that deep community connection that we talk about and we hear about. And sometimes we might even, read about and want to talk to our families about and raise our children this way. But you're actually living this. And I want to share a couple quotes that I read. One from the one and only Katie Couric, who said that Steve's book is a must read about finding meaning and purpose in your own backyard. That's huge. I love
Yeah.
that. And of course, Steve Case, the founder of AOL, chairman of Revolution, also love this too, proving that the Midwest is no longer flyover country. Steve's journey of reinvention will resonate with anyone who's looking for concrete examples of how innovation and entrepreneurship is alive and well all across America. Huge, huge. See, we got to talk about this. I want to tell you, I don't know if you know this, but I actually just got off the plane a few days ago from Ohio. So, we've been doing this, a whole bunch of traveling this summer with my kids, but
Oh,
I
good.
think that, yeah, it just kind of gives us a lot of perspective and it's making our lives a lot richer. But I want to talk about sort of your journey and how you got to where you are today. Because I know former Google executive, public servant, journalist, and now CEO and publisher of the Minnesota Star Tribune. Let's talk about what you're working on right now. What have you been doing, Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Winnie. And thanks for having me on. For those who are watching, appreciate it. I'm coming to you right now from the Minnesota Star Tribune in downtown Minneapolis, where I'm the publisher and CEO. My first job in a news organization. This was never a part of my life plan, if you will. I spent most of my career in technology at Google and YouTube. I was there in the early days of YouTube. I was maybe employee 85 or 86, something like that. And those days when the platform was still just figuring itself out, but was increasingly being used for news and political content. And so I came on board to help the company figure out where it might grow in that area. And it was a really unique time. It was the sort of utopian phase of the internet. Everything was upside. We were getting major presidential candidates like Barack Obama to start YouTube channels. And really, it kind of felt like technology had only upside. And it did, in many ways, early on, it did. It was this kind of leveler for power in our market that was really, really inspiring. Of course, technology changed over the coming decade that I was in the Valley and spent time both at YouTube and then Google. And ultimately, my wife and I had twins 8 years ago and started thinking, gosh, where do we want to raise them? And I was from Minnesota originally, had never really planned on coming back. But my wife is a venture capital investor, and she got a job with Rise of the Rest, Steve Case's firm that invests in startups outside of the coast. And so we thought, gosh, what if we did that job from the middle of the country rather than the Valley? And so made this kind of life pivot point, like many do, to leave and go somewhere different. And that journey of leaving the coasts and going back to my home state. And then for me, leaving Google and going into state government as Governor Walz's commissioner of employment and economic development. And then now here at the Strip in a local media environment, kind of is the narrative arc of this journey. And for those who are looking for reinvention moments in their life and their career that are rooted in purpose, I hope that it can serve as a bit of a guidebook for those looking to make a difference at a time when I think we need more people doing public service of various kinds.
We do need more people doing public service during this time. I love that you say that, I gotta congratulate you first of all on your book. I know
Thanks.
you spend a lot of time, and I know most people don't realize how difficult it is to write a book, and I know that this is something a labor of love for you. But I love how you describe this journey not just as a return home, but as a sort of complete reimagining of what home even means. So I'm curious, what do you think was the first moment that you knew that the story that you did eventually share in the book needed to be shared?
Yeah. When I started my job in government, it was a pretty big jump from, again, Google to government. And you're suddenly leading a large bureaucracy. And then a year into my time in government, the COVID pandemic hit. And so for all of us in government roles, suddenly your job changes overnight. And I mean, everyone's lives changed overnight in so many ways. But for me in government, suddenly I found myself in a job that had been designed to grow jobs for our state and grow the economy through incentives and workforce programs, turned into a job that's really about kind of holding the place together at a challenging time. So I spent so much time on unemployment insurance, for example, which I was responsible for making sure that we got unemployment insurance checks out on time and effectively. We did a whole host of pandemic mitigation measures that we would all love to just forget had to happen. But there were times when every single day, the governor and myself and the health commissioner were on television telling Minnesota, what the latest was and trying to explain the tough decisions that he was having to make in ways that made sense. And as I talked to friends back on the coast about this, or even friends that were still in tech, no matter where they were, about what a strange turn this felt like, and also how much purpose I was finding in it, the feedback I began to get was, wow, this is kind of a unique story. And I sort of started to wonder, is there a book in this maybe? I don't know. And I always liked to write. I always kind of wanted to write a book, but never knew quite what that would be. And then when I kind of finished my 4 years in government, thought, man, maybe it's the time to do it. So put a pitch together and was able to land a publisher, and we were off to the races. But the book ended up becoming far more than kind of a COVID pandemic career change story. It got, I hope, a layer deeper into just what it's like to build community at this time in our country. For me, that meant as a 40-year-old at the time, moving states and trying to make new friends. And I talk about that journey just as a community level of how you make those life changes. And my wife and I shared in the book a lot about our fertility journey, which was a big part of our life and has been, and ultimately has been successful for us. But so many face those kinds of challenges, and then got even to some of my spiritual journey and kind of the purpose-driven component of that. So the book ended up being a lot more about community and togetherness than, say, just the adventure, I suppose, of leaving tech for government. But there's a lot packed in it, and ultimately, it's a personal story. So I hope people find something within it to resonate.
I love that. Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing that with us. And I see so many friends joining us live right now. I want to say a big welcome also to Ashley on LinkedIn. I see Joshua on YouTube. I see Sadiq on YouTube. I see Nicholas on YouTube. Thank you, so many of you, all of you joining in and your comments already. Steve, I think this is something that we've been hearing a lot about, right? We've been hearing about tech execs from Silicon Valley. We're hearing about government, of course, new media. This almost seems very timely. And for those of you who think, oh, those three words hit them sounds familiar, you're probably not alone. But you also write about trading sort of the pace of technology, of tech, right? Working at Google and YouTube, where everything goes so very, very quickly. And let's be honest, probably very much more efficient than perhaps sort of the typical local government. Was that the experience that you experienced, or what surprised you most about sort of
Yeah.
that shift going from tech to local government?
I mean, it's a massive change for anybody who does it. You're definitely in a different culture and government, to be sure. And I knew that going in. I tried to steel myself up for it. I didn't want to be the Google guy who kind of came in and cartoonishly claimed that all things should run just like a business. But at the same time, what I did find is people within government were excited to have somebody from the outside come in, and that a fresh pair of eyes when you change positions in life is actually a superpower. Not knowing quite how government bureaucracy should work maybe asks you questions about why it works as though it does and what you might change about it. And I found, actually, this is one of the messages that I try to lift up in the book, there's a lot of really innovative people working in government. There's a lot of bureaucrats who are incredibly creative and want to do things in different ways. I think oftentimes the culture of government slows that down, to your point. Certainly the culture at Google for the period of time that I was there was very dynamic and innovative, and rewarded good ideas and tolerated a degree of failure. We don't tolerate failure in our institutions nearly as often as we should. And not that we shouldn't hold government officials accountable, but I think one of the problems you see today with the decreasing trust we have in institutions is that we don't give our government bureaucrats the chance to do the same things we ask the private sector to do, which is to experiment and try new things and engage. And so, one of my insights, I guess, coming out of government was that, man, there are a lot of really innovative people. For us, the crisis of the pandemic forced us to innovate in ways that I think ultimately were pretty constructive. But as a society, if we're going to make institutions that work for us, I think we need to almost treat every moment like a crisis and give ourselves more of a chance to try new things. And certainly in COVID, we did it at my agency, but I think more broadly, as you look at what's happening in Washington with Doge and kind of reactions to government not being efficient or effective, I think maybe wrong method but right idea is like, how do you make these institutions work better? My take is more through innovation than just rote efficiency, but it's going to take society creating a space where that can happen. So I enjoyed government. I actually found it really rewarding, even if at times I was pulling my hair out like anybody would, because it's definitely not the same as working at a startup or in tech.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm sure things move a lot more quickly, but I love that you share, Steve, that there is innovation and people who are very passionate and want to make change within the government. Because so many times, especially now, we've been talking. You just mentioned Doge. The impression that we've been hearing in the last year is that government is antiquated and old and
Right.
just bloated, and that this is just nowhere close to the levels of efficiency as what you would have experienced, like you mentioned, Silicon Valley and tech startups or just technology companies as a whole. But the fact that you said that they embrace and are excited to have somebody from the outside, I think
Yeah.
that's really powerful. And I think that's a message that that I think we needed to hear too from you.
Yeah, I think so. It's funny, when I started the job in government, I had a advisor tell me, here's what government's like. Everybody inside of government is a weebie. And a weebie means we be here before you got here and we be here when you're gone. In other words, they're just going to wait you out, right? Like you're a political
Right.
appointee, you're here for a hot second. And I think it's fair advice. At the same time, I don't think we should paint that broad of a brush for everybody that's in government. And I also think, like, you don't have to join government to make an impact in the civic space. I encourage people in the book to think about any small way you can go local to make change. I think it's easy to get kind of depressed or, I don't know, disenchanted with sort of making change when you only look at the national level, when you see the polarization that's there, the divisions, they're real. They're worse the higher you go up, I think, in the system. When you focus on your own community, whether you're joining government or just going to a city council meeting, you'll find a lot more reasons for hope. You just will. Like when you're trying to fill a pothole, you don't care whether the guy next to you or not is a Republican or Democrat, right? It's just you got to get things
Mhm.
done. And so
Right.
I found that going from a global tech company where like any pixel we changed at Google would have, a massive impact on millions, if not billions of people, to a local government where still scaled impact, but far more tangible in front of you was really meaningful. And I think more people should try ways to do that feel right for them. And I think government is something we shouldn't give up on, but actually it's a great avenue to get things done that the private sector isn't quite designed to tackle.
I love that. Seeing the local changes that you could make, or spark an idea and like really lean in and see if you can help your community. I wanted to circle back to Steve, if we could, talking about crisis leadership.
Mhm.
Obviously we've seen a lot of that through the even this year, right? We saw the wildfires here in California. We've seen the flooding that's occurred in Texas. We got to talk about this. I know you stepped into a really pivotal role just when you mentioned the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, right when it hit. And of course, we can't forget what happened with George Floyd, the tragic murder, right? Unfolding nearby where you are. So these events really reshaped communities, not just your community, but across the country. We felt it here in California too. Like, what was it like for you to lead during these really unprecedented times? Like, what did you learn?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I learned is just looking at leaders around me who I thought were doing it well and trying to do what they were doing. Quite frankly, that's how you learn in these situations. And I felt fortunate to work for a governor and Governor Walz, who I thought was quite good at being, if anything, explainer in chief. Often in these moments of being very willing to get on TV every day and just share what he knew and didn't know, and kind of coming at that with the calm demeanor of a teacher, which is his professional background, was helpful. And so we all tried to do the same. My colleague at the health department, Jan Malcolm, was, I think, similarly steely in the eyes of some pretty challenging times. I think for me, it was about trying to be very specific, say to the public what you know and don't know, not be afraid to try to rewrite the playbook, because we had to do that often. Knowing when your job is to show up and just get yelled at, because often that's your job in government, is to show up and take questions and get yelled at for a bit because people are stressed and it's challenging. But I
Mhm.
actually ultimately found out at a personal level that I quite liked working in crisis. I would never wish a crisis upon myself
Mhm.
or anyone, but I found that the things that were frustrating to me about government in terms of bureaucracy and slow moving, dynamics suddenly sped up during a crisis because we had to move quickly. And so I enjoyed it. It felt deeply relevant to me. I think in life you want to do work that feels like it has purpose and matters. And whether it's in government or the private sector, you can find it anywhere. But crisis sometimes really tests you and tests what matters the most. And I think staying calm in those moments is critical, and also defaulting towards action, which I think you have to do in these situations often, rather than kind of a passive wait and see approach, was a key lesson for me too. And so I made plenty of mistakes during the pandemic, and I talk about them in the book, and I suppose every leader did. But I rarely made a mistake where it's because I didn't do something. It was more that I did something. So I think it's better to lean forward and try things, because when you do, you learn more, and that's probably true in crisis or not. But I found in crisis in particular, you just got to move. You got to keep making decisions and going, and even if they're not right, you got to wash them out of your head and keep going. You don't have time to kind of like think it all through at a layer that can paralyze folks sometimes.
I love that. And I find it so refreshing. I'm sure people are watching or feeling this way. Like, you just feel fresh, like you're coming from tech. And then you've seen what big businesses and what change can do. And you come and you bring it and you lean into your community.
Yeah.
I know one of the big themes in the book is like going local, right? And just, rolling up the sleeves. Doesn't matter who's next to me. Let's just get the job done. I'm sure. And you mentioned Governor Walsh, who we know ran a very busy vice president candidacy. Unfortunately, we didn't get the coach in office, but he
Mhm.
did bring us joy when he was running, right? So that I think a lot of people remember that. But also, one of the things that you talked about is, and I really want to have you, unfold this to us a little bit more, the concept of going local. A lot of us are watching right now, learning from you, and maybe just feeling like, I've been hearing a lot of this in last year. People feeling like hopeless, right?
I know.
They feel like there's nothing they can do. They're out of control. I'm hearing from doctors who feel like they're concerned for their patients. Some who are worried about, you mentioned COVID, like whether or not they're going to be able to get like the care that they need for their parents or their children. But you also talk about community investment, and whether it's through public service or media, like we're doing now, or technology, this can be sort of a path to renewal, if you will. So, what do you think are some small but maybe meaningful ways, some suggestions for someone watching today that you say, you know what, this is something that we've seen taking shape in Minnesota, and maybe something you can try?
Yeah. Well, the call to go local is not a particularly new idea, but it feels like it has some fresh resonance right now. Again, just given some of the national challenges, and again, if you buy into the belief, and I think this data shows it's true, that declining trust in our most important institutions is an existential threat to the country's unity, then if you're going to rebuild those institutions, I'd say starting local just gives you a more tangible place to do that. Less polarization, more immediate impact. And I'd argue that actually, when we do a lot of things at the local level, they can be copied elsewhere in this kind of great laboratory of democracy. So if you're watching this and trying to figure out, well, what does that mean for me? Like, how do I don't think you have to
Mhm.
leave tech and join government or switch your entire job. Certainly, if you do, I think those institutions are benefited from it. But you can go to your local school board meeting. You can show up and vote. You can engage with members of your church. I would say the broader thing that I try to lift up in the book is don't just do it with people that look like you or come from your same background. One of the things I learned a lot in government in particular is the power of bridging social capital, right? Bonding social capital, the social theorists will tell you, is spending great time with people that look like or come from your background. That's important, to be sure. But what America needs now more than anything, I would argue, is bridging social capital, which is creating social value and worth between groups that don't quite look like each other. And for me, that happened at a really unique instance that I tell about in the book, where we had this law in Minnesota that was about 85 years old on unemployment insurance, been written in 1939. This essentially said, if you're a high school student, you're not eligible for unemployment insurance payments, even though your employer is paying into that system on your behalf, right? So it was a really kind of sideways rule, but it came from this antiquated sense that high school kids don't need the money. Fast forward to today, and many of the high school kids who work in our state anyway are immigrants who are helping their entire families stay afloat, keeping the heat on, putting food on the table. And when the pandemic hit and those young students lost their jobs, this was a matter of life and death. This wasn't just, spending cash, if you will. And so these young people, again, not inside of government, from outside of it, mounted a whole case against that law at a time when it was pretty hard to change in Minnesota, given we had Democrats and Republicans both in power in the legislature. They had to both buy into this idea of expanding the social safety net. But I was able to partner with them. A Republican senator from greater Minnesota, kind of the rural part of our state, partnered with them. They partnered with the AARP, a kind of unlikely collection of people who all kind of could see the worth and merit in this program, and ended up changing the law. And so these teenagers essentially drove this social change that I don't think they'd have even known it was a problem until it hit them, and then they did something about it. And that was to me, that story in the book shines out as just one where, yeah, if you're looking to make a change, find somebody who's not quite like you, do it from whatever angle you can, whether it's advocacy or business or government or what have you. But it is possible. It's still possible in America to make big change, and we got to believe in each other to do it.
I love that. And I love that you're encouraging people to, reach out to people that look nothing like them, different backgrounds. And I love how you mentioned these teenagers, because I think so often teenagers are now dismissed as, just being very young people. They don't have problems. But absolutely, if they're supporting their families, and we know many, many teenagers are supporting their families, and they're going to need help if they lose their job. This is it seems so common sense. So I'm glad to see if you brought that up. I mean, 1939 is a long time ago. You would think that these things would have gotten changed before you even showed up. No offense, of course. But we need to talk about this though, because you mentioned this in your comments about navigating sort of that crossroad of changing careers, and you certainly did. I will be honest with you. When you told us that you were going to be moving to Minnesota, we were thinking to ourselves, "Wow, well, I mean, you're kind of, you and Mary were living sort of that dream. You had big jobs, great neighborhood, beautiful kids, right? What are you doing?" Like, California's pretty great. I mean, where you were living, you had friends, but you decided to do a pivot. And so pivoting and changing careers for a lot of people can sound scary, because it sounds like you're starting over. And a lot of people nowadays are thinking about that. They're thinking of whether they should try to find that why. But your story in your book, I love this one, is that it shows that reinvention, although it isn't always about starting completely fresh, but it can be about going deeper. So talk about that a little bit. Like, what guidance would you offer to someone who maybe themselves are seeking purpose sort of in unexpected places? Maybe you're thinking about making a big move.
Yeah. I mean, reinvention is a very American theme. And I think there are reinventions in every person's life, big and small. For us, it was a pretty big one. I mean, leaving the Valley and going to Minnesota was a big change for us. Mary wasn't from here. She's from San Diego. So that was a big shift for her, even bigger than for me, because I was coming back home. Professionally, going from Google to government was a big shift for me. And she also left Google and started her own venture capital firm. So I feel like we were lucky to get to do it in the sense that we'd worked long enough in another field where we had the ability to take a bit of a risk, but it still did feel like a giant risk. I think the thing you learn when you do it is, for all the imposter syndrome you might have when you're trying something new, or the fear you might naturally feel, which we felt too. It's hard to change. We didn't go into this completely naive and idealistic. But the thing you learn pretty quickly is that the superpower you get when you do that is just a completely fresh pair of eyes in a new space. And that's really powerful. People underestimate the superpower of fresh eyes a lot of the time. And so whatever impulse is driving you to engage in a reinvention, whether it's big or small, know that even though it might seem scary and undefined, that actually helps you do things differently than somebody else might do them. And at a time when so many businesses and companies and organizations and institutions need new ideas and need, frankly, disruption if we're going to rebuild them, you coming in from the outside is actually kind of the biggest gift you can bring. I say this to our new employees at the Star Tribune all the time. We just had a coffee this morning with our new employees, which we do once a month with everyone who's new. And my biggest line to them is like, ask everyone all day long why things are the way they are. Keep pressing us. Like, we need. And so that's whether you're inventing something, is it like a job or an industry or what have you, that helps. And then look, it ain't going to be perfectly easy. My book does not sugarcoat like, oh, and then we idyllically went back to the pastoral Midwest and everything was fine and we never had a problem. Like, I get into how it sucks sometimes and how cold it is here. So I think, I was very honest and vulnerable about it too. I think, you're going to have this in any journey and reinvention. And I guess for me personally, what kind of kept me going was my wife, married, and having a partner to do it with, just whether it's, your spouse or a friend or what have you, like doing it together is always easier. And so we drew upon each other and we drew ourselves closer in the experience. And I get into that part of the journey too, because I certainly didn't do any of this alone.
I'm glad you gave Mary a lot of credit because she's pretty remarkable. You're an amazing wife. Yeah, I know the two of you co-founded Silicon North Stars, and
Yeah.
part of that, for those of you who are watching live, and maybe you probably don't know this, but they also support underrepresented youth and technology. And I want to talk about this. I mean, Steve, you and I are both parents, and a big part of what we do is we're also making sure that we're good examples for our kids.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, how has your relationship, or when you think about your kids, right, and what you're doing today, what do you want them to remember about this part of the journey with you? Like, do you feel like the twins are gonna go sort of follow in your footsteps, are gonna follow more mom's footsteps, or like what part of what you do today is about them?
Yeah, well, everything. We have 8-year-old twins. They're the center of our universe. We love them to death. They're at a very fun age.
They're so cute.
Yeah. They're cute, yeah. And twin parenting is its own unique version of parenting, right? It's a unique journey of a boy and a girl. I think it's far too early to know what they want to do professionally, obviously. They have their interests, but I think what Mary and I both try to instill them is just do something that you really care about and that you love. We work probably more than most people work. I'll just be honest with you. Like, that's kind of what we've signed up for. I do feel like we're good about family time, but our kids see us working, and they're, and they see us struggling with work too. Like, we like to share with them the things we're struggling with in professional settings as well. But I think they know we both love what we're doing and really care about it. And not that every job is a sugar-coated sweet dream. Part of what we love is the challenge, but I think as a dad, you want to make sure your kids understand that there's some big problems to solve out there and that you should run towards them and try to solve them rather than maybe just taking the easy route. And I guess for both of us, we're trying to do things that feel like they're rooted in purpose and that are solving real challenges that need to be solved. Like, take journalism, right? If the Minnesota Star Tribune doesn't exist in 10 years, our state has serious problems, right? You need strong regional, local news organizations, and journalism faces some pretty unprecedented challenges. We can get into all that if it's interesting, but I would just say in the whole, more journalism is better for society, and we don't have any reason to believe that's inevitable. So that feels really meaningful to me, even if it's hard. And so try to bring the kids along for that journey.
I love that. Well, it's interesting, my team and I, we've worked with here locally employees of the Los Angeles Times for many, many years.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me that you and Mary went from new technology back to what we would consider like older media, right?
Yeah.
So what is your perspective on this? Are you sort of Googleizing what you're doing in print, or what's the plan here, Steve?
Yeah, well, yeah, and the LA Times has gone through their challenges like all of us have. It's I would say this, we have all the headwinds that every news organization in the country faces. Declining print subscriptions by 20% year over year, a vastly changing market and sort of attitude towards subscriptions as a spending habit for people who now are using subscription dollars to do everything from Disney to Trampoline to the Month to Wine Club to a newspaper, and then just different reader habits too in terms of how the news is delivered. So part of why this job is attractive to me, though, is that despite the headwinds in Minnesota, we have some unique tailwinds. Glenn Taylor, our owner, who until recently owned the Timberwolves and Lynx as well, Minnesota's arguably most successful businessman of the last 100 years, really believes in our organization. He's really why I'm here. He's investing in it to reimagine it. And that's a tailwind. I think also Minnesotans have kind of higher rates of civic participation and engagement. That helps us. We've got a pretty high density of sports teams here, even though we're a state of only 5.5 million. So there's some good things. And here's what the plan is. I mean, part of it is just moving from being a newspaper to a digital platform. That means far more specific and effective audience targeting. That means a digital subscription flow that matches something akin more to a modern subscription property than something that gets dumped on your doorstep in a little green bag every morning. But honestly, probably the biggest thing is moving beyond ads and subs. How do you get into other revenue streams that can support the size of a newsroom we need to have to do well? And so we've opened up a philanthropic arm to pull in donations. We're doing cause marketing for local brands about the best work they do in the community. Not journalism, but sort of pay-to-play storytelling, if you will. We're leaning heavily into high school sports as one very specific content area where we know there's a lot of willingness to pay because your kid's in the paper, you want to see the paper. So we're launching a whole platform called Strip Varsity on that front. So we're trying to take some bigger swings, and then we're reinvesting in the brand and our marketing. I mean, that's just part of it, but we changed our name from the Star Tribune to the Minnesota Star Tribune this year as a way to really put forward this idea of statewide pride and identity. Minnesota, polls have shown, has the highest state pride of any state in the country. Isn't that kind of cool? So we're trying to play on that a little bit in this moment. But to say we haven't figured out would be a misnomer. We don't. We're rolling, but we've got some good bets we're making. And I think the community is rooting for us. I think people intuitively understand you want objective, fact-based journalism in a community. And so we're taking a swing.
I love it. And it does sound like you're bringing a lot of that, the tech muscles into this.
Trying
this
to.
Yeah. So that I'm pretty confident that'll do quite well. Well, I know many of you are here listening and with me live and Steve live. And I know that you definitely want to get your hands on Steve's book, How I Found Myself in the Midwest. I mean, you can't forget that title, right? And we'll definitely make sure that we will include the links in the comments, of course, for you to do that. But Steve, it's always been such a joy to see you, and of course, I miss Mary and give love to the kids for us as well. But thank you so much for such a thoughtful conversation. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Is there anything else that I should have asked you about the book that I didn't?
No, I think this has been a great conversation. I hope your viewers can find some hope in it. I'll say that while it's about the Midwest, because that's where I am, my hope is that it's really relevant anywhere. I think when you explore a story of your own environment, your own community, doesn't matter whether you're in the Midwest or the North, the South, or the East, investing in the people around us and the communities we live in is really what America needs right now. So I hope that resonates regardless of where people are coming from when they consider the book. So thanks for having me.
Investing in people all around us. And so I think we can definitely do that today, right? I mean, make a difference and maybe reach out, say hello, smile to someone who looks completely different from you, for even, whether it be race, gender, and everything in between. But most importantly, Steve, I'm curious. I'm sure many of you are with me are wondering what's next for Steve Grove. Is there something else in front of us, Steve, that we can get excited about? You don't have to give us everything, but are we going to be seeing you are you going to be running for anything in the future that we should be paying attention to?
I get that question a decent amount just because the book has a lot of public. Yeah. I'd say, I don't have a specific plan on that front. I will be honest that I enjoyed public service. I really did. I think that comes through in the book. And so, if that's a future chapter, I will let it come as it does. But I would say right now, I'm really engaged in the Strib. I mean, what we're doing here in this newspaper has a lot of public service to it. And so life has chapters. I'm enjoying this one. We'll see what comes next. But there's a lot of ways to serve. It doesn't got to be in public service. It can be in business. It can be in media. It can be in finance. But yeah, finding people that don't look like you and trying to do good things together is a good place to start.
I love it. There's a lot of ways that we can serve. I don't know about you, but I feel inspired. I'm excited. I'm gonna go out and see and do some myself. But friends, how I found myself in the Midwest. It is now on shelves. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at wherever your local bookstore. Whatever you do, you just want to make sure to grab your copy. And I'm just gonna do an extra nudge. I would definitely gift this out to your friends, maybe for the holidays. I think this is something you'll be glad you did. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much for being here in your time. For those of you who are with me, I'm Winnie, and thank you so much for spending your time with us here on Level Up Live. Such a treat. Until next time, let's keep investing in what matters most: others, our community, and each other. And for those of you, thank you so much for being a part of Level Up Live. Like and subscribe to stay updated on all the newest updates and insights, business, and beyond. And you can catch full past episodes of Level Up with Winnie Sun, featuring on NASDAQ, Amazon Fire, Samsung, LG, Roku, and other streaming platforms, and of course, YouTube. And so when sharing an episode online, thank you so much for tagging at Winnie Sun. And make sure to Google Steve Grove and check out his book, okay? This is something that you must do. But thank you so much, Steve, for your time. And I can't wait to talk to you again very soon.
Yeah, thanks, Winnie. Thanks everyone for watching. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. Bye bye.
Bye.